I really screwed up with her. Let me tell you the story real quick. Today is Echo's hatch day. I mean, not the day you're watching this, but the day that I'm recording it. Not today, but it was yesterday. I shot all the B-roll yesterday, and then I'm doing the talking today. Welcome to the Green Room. I'm Bob Bledsoe. I thought this would be a great time to do a superdwarf check-in since Echo is exactly a year old. She's a superdwarf reticulated python. She is 50% Karompa, 25% Kalatoa, and 12% Slayer. Those are localities, not morphs. Look at how blurry she is. You're so cute, but kind of blurry when you do that up close to the camera. We're going to talk about a big screw up that I did with Echo, so that hopefully you can learn from that. We're going to weigh and measure her. We're going to give her a birthday Reptilink, which she did so well with her target training yesterday, but there was all kinds of drama with that feeding. Again, my fault. So we'll take a look at that. And we're going to compare her to Stella, my 9-month-old superdwarf reticulated python. Say hello to Kent, my brother behind the camera.
Here's what I know about super dwarves. It's about a year old. That's when their poison glands come in.
Not true, Kent. And if they did have poison, you'd be safe as long as you didn't eat the snake.
Gross. And it is true. I read it in my book.
You don't own any books.
It was a rental.
Let's get into this, shall we? Now, I'm no reticulated python expert by any means, and I'm learning as I go. So let's start with this first bit of drama. I really screwed up with her. Let me tell you the story real quick. Reticulated pythons tend to push occasionally if they're not happy with something, and oftentimes it's because things are too warm in their enclosure. Echo had been pushing enough to give her 2 little marks below her eyes. She was kind of pushing scales up below her eyes, and that's when I realized that I was keeping her too warm. I had her at around 90 on the warm side, and it was about 83 or so on the cool side, and that was too warm for her. I think some retics are fine with that, but she didn't like it. So I turned her temps down to about 87, 88 on the warm side, which is still enough for her to digest, and that stopped her from pushing for a while. About a month or so later, she regurgitated. I watched her do it. She was on the ladder, sleeping, and she woke up and started contorting her body all over and making these crazy hacking sounds, and I thought she was going to die. And then she hacked up this little tiny pellet thing. I'm going to give you an example of the size. It looked like this, like a tiny piece of paper almost, along with some bile. It was probably hair or whatever. Once I realized what was going on, I was relieved that she wasn't dying, but why did she regurgitate? So here's probably what happened. Her last meal was over 72 hours before she regurgitated, and I had decided to give her a good target training session. So I was going to feed her 3 little tiny snacks. It was a little tiny mouse and 2 button quail, not even enough to even make a lump in her belly after she had eaten all 3. So it wasn't a big meal at all, but you know, it was fine. Or at least it seemed fine, but here's what we think happened. I gave her a meal that consisted of rodent and bird, which is asking her system to digest beaks and feathers and bones and fur, all kinds of stuff. That's a lot for her system to digest. And it's not that they can't do it, but I also had turned her temps down a little over a month before that. So the deal is, if a cold-blooded animal takes too long to digest their food, it'll start going bad in their belly. Or if their temps aren't warm enough at all, that meal will just rot in their belly. And it could kill them if they don't get rid of it. So I think the combination of having her try to digest all those different things, which maybe takes them longer, and again, this is just a guess, combined with the fact that it's taking her a little bit longer to digest her food because her temps came down a couple degrees, I think what happened is the very last of her meal, that little tiny pellet that she regurgitated, was probably starting to go bad, and she was getting a tummy ache, so she decided to get rid of it. Again, my fault, and I felt awful. I gave her 2 weeks off of eating because that's what you do for any snake if they regurgitate. You need to give them 2 weeks before you have them put anything down their neck, because the regurgitation causes sores up their neck and potentially in their mouth because their bile is so powerful. It digests bone and beak and stuff like that. So it's really powerful. You don't want it coming up the other way. So I learned a big lesson there, which is don't give her complex meals, because her heat is down a little bit. It's going to take her longer to digest, so she needs to have simpler meals, one appropriately sized meal at a time, which is what we always say anyway. So that was a big lesson. Joe at Reach Out Reptiles helped me troubleshoot this one. I really appreciate those guys, Garrett and Joe over there, for their knowledge and experience on these snakes. I still think that if you're target training your snake, it's not a big problem to occasionally give them a couple of smaller meals. In this case, it was a problem though, and I learned from it, and I won't do it with Echo again. Okay, other mistakes that I've done since we're doing a confessional here. I think in the beginning I was feeding her a little bit too much. She was handling it well, but I realized pretty early on that she was growing really fast. Like, she wasn't getting fat, but she was growing pretty quick, and I realized that I was probably giving her a little bit too big of meals, so I dialed that back, and now she eats a bit less. But my guess is that when we weigh and measure her, there might be others in the clutch that other people have that might be a little bit smaller than Echo if they were feeding more conservatively those first few months of having her. Let's see, I've been bit twice by her. Echo is a very sociable snake, and I don't think she has a defensive bone in her body, but she really likes food. And twice now, I've gone into her enclosure with a temp gun. Exact same scenario, you guys. She's been all the way on the other side of her enclosure, and I'm not even looking at her because I know she's over there. I reach my hand in with the temp gun, and here's the thing about snakes, is they can relocate themselves real fast. So twice now I have reached my hand in and gotten thunk on my hand. Can't hardly feel it. She's a very tiny snake, not a big deal, but you know, something to learn from. We can all learn from our mistakes, even if we have to make the mistake twice before we learn from it. Echo still pushes occasionally, but it's only when she wants to come out or she wants to be fed. I know this because she only does it when I'm in the room. And I know that because I put a camera on her when I leave for the weekend, and I get to watch her via my cell phone and see her behavior. And she doesn't even come near the glass usually when I'm not in the room. But her little sores have healed up on her face, and she doesn't do it nearly enough to hurt herself at this point. But I'm monitoring it because as she grows and goes through phases and whatever, she could end up doing it a lot more. You don't need to push just because I'm in the room. Yeah, you don't need to do that. You're smart. You have smart brains. By the way, all this tongue flicking that Echo's doing on my face, I let my snakes do that sometimes, and you'll see that in some of the B-roll that I'm going to show in a bit. I don't recommend it, though, because unless you really know your snakes, and I feel like I really know my snakes, but snakes will strike and bite faces. I've seen it happen. I know my snakes really well, and even so, I'm still taking a risk. I just want to make that disclaimer so that new snake keepers don't necessarily have their snake tongue flicking on their nose, because you could get bit. We're about to weigh and measure Echo, but first I want to take a moment to acknowledge my Patreon supporters. I'm doing this awkwardly while I try to keep Echo on my neck without slipping off my shirt. Oh my gosh, you guys, she's crawling down my back. Anyway, I really appreciate these Patreon supporters. Where is she? Look at her, you guys. I gotta grab her. Okay, we got it. All right, thanks to all these Patreon supporters. I just sent out t-shirts this week to the Patreon supporters who are due for a t-shirt this month, and I sent out sticker packs. I'm really thankful for that Green Room Python's Patreon community. Thanks, you guys. Also, the Discord server is up and rolling. It's the Python Green Room. I'll put a link in the description, but go join that Discord if you haven't already, because really cool, positive group of reptile keepers there. Okay, let's do some hatch day stuff. You've wrapped around, Stella has wrapped her tail around a button in my shirt. So we've got Stella right here and Echo right here. I'm sure many of you would love to see what a superdwarf reticulated python weighs and measures at a year old. And we're going to do that with both Echo and Stella, who I now have both of them. And to me, they seem exactly the same size, but we're going to take a look. And really, individual snakes are different, and especially with superdwarfs, because depending on their locality, depending on the size of their mother, and their father probably, but mostly their mother, and all kinds of other factors can affect the size of your snake, and they vary greatly. But we're going to do this for fun because it's Echo's hatch day. The other thing to keep in mind is that both of these snakes are from very small localities, so they're going to be smaller than a lot of other dwarf and super dwarf reticulated pythons. Echo is 50% of her blood is Caramba, which is the smallest island. 25% of her is Kalatoa, which is the second smallest, and Stella is 100% Kalatoa. So these are both going to end up being tiny snakes. And they've tied up my hands. Can I have my hands back? Can I have my hands back, ladies? Thanks. I measured them using the SERP widgets tool online, which is a nice tool to use. There's some margin for user error for sure, but I think it's probably more accurate, especially with these two. It's going to be more accurate than using the string method. So based on that tool, Echo measured at 3'7" and Stella measured at 3'6". Now, if you're used to ball pythons, a 3.5 foot snake is like a 900 gram subadult. I'm guessing at that. Somebody weigh your 3.5 foot ball python and tell me in the comments what they weigh. Echo still squeezes into a hide that I use for hatchling ball pythons. She weighed in at 274 grams. There's a 4 gram difference between Echo and Stella. She weighed in at 278. That's 4 grams is about the size of a poop. They're essentially the same size. I think the 1 inch difference in weight could be also the margin of error for that using that SERP widgets tool. That's Stella coming across my head. Let's talk about some brain stuff with these super dwarfs. They are highly intelligent animals. Both of these snakes are pretty well target trained. Stella, it took her about 3 feedings with the target before she started associating that target with food. Echo's been following a target since she was about 2 months old, so she's pretty good at it. So I went to feed Echo a Reptilink yesterday and made a real mess of it. She was hanging out on the counter above her enclosure, and I just wanted to target her back into the enclosure, or close enough anyway, before I fed her. And what happened is, these Reptilinks are a little bit too big for her, so I usually pull a little bit of meat out. So I did that, and then I forgot to warm it back up. So when I offered it to her, she didn't really know what to do. She was all excited about food because of the target, but then I give her this cold thing and she's like, I don't even know what to do with this. Like, she opened her mouth a little bit but didn't strike. So I went to warm it back up and re-offered it to her. At that point, I didn't care about really moving her. She was sitting on top of this puzzle feeder. So she struck the food and I decided to just take the puzzle feeder and put it back in her enclosure to get her back in there. But she took a thermometer, hygrometer with her, and the puzzle feeder didn't fit in our enclosure, so I just ended up sort of sloppily setting it in front. So I decided to stop messing with her because it's her birthday and she doesn't need a bumbling monkey messing with her while she's trying to eat her food. But the point is that she's great at following a target. Okay, I'm going to show you some really cool footage that I shot yesterday that could almost be considered social behavior from these snakes. But first, let's cut to a Kent's Corner.
Hi, I'm Kent of Kent's Corner, and welcome to Kent's Corner. Die-hard viewers of my segment know that I have my own snake. His name is Eric the Murderer. Well, I've recently added 3 more snakes to my arsenal of murderers. This is the first one I added. He's an Asian green snapper. Watch out, he'll get you. And this one is the dreaded raccoon-eyed stinging viper. I don't think I need to tell you to stay away from that one. And lastly is the Himalayan clown monster. Try to find anyone who's lived to tell the tale of this snake. Now, some of you who have a keen sense of observation might have noticed that these snakes aren't real. That's right, they're fake, because I'm not trying to endanger my community. Just get one of these high-quality, yet completely safe replicas, and you'll be seen as a responsible member of your community. Paper cut. Dang it. Oh, shoot. Thank you for watching Kent's Corner.
Thanks for that very informative episode, Kent. I'm sorry that you were injured by your snake.
I think it's getting infected.
Both of these snakes are very well socialized, and they're used to me. They know who I am. They're used to crawling around on their ladder, and they are most active around 4 or 5 o'clock a.m. Right now it's 8:30 in the morning. I'm shooting this, and so they're still fairly active, but man, 4 or 5 o'clock, if I'm awake, I put them on the ladder and they're all over the place. So that's what we did yesterday. So these girls are all over the ladder usually, and they like to be up and down the ladder, and then they like to crawl back on me. And the reason that I say they like to do it is because if given the option, they have a tendency to do it. So yesterday they were doing a lot of that behavior, and then they got fixated on trying to get to the ground. And both of them together were just constantly trying to get to the ground. They saw a ukulele case on the ground and some other things, and they really wanted to get there. And I don't let them crawl on the ground because they could get lost easily. So what I realized is that as they were crawling onto me and back onto the ladder and then trying to get to the ground, and then I'd put them back on the ladder, they'd go to the ground again, I realized that it's because there's not enough interesting stuff on this ladder for them. The ladder has become not a novel item for them anymore. Even though this is relatively new, I used to have a ball here and I changed this out, and this thing, I guess this is very close to the other ledge that Echo had on there, and now that ledge is in her cage. But things need to be changed up a little bit. Hey, can I get you back on your ladder? Can you be here? I think what happened is they were really interested in someplace other than the ladder, like the floor. They're always crawling on me, but I think that I don't become boring to them because I move around. You know, they'll crawl onto me and then I'll go across the way and get coffee, and they can come with me for that. They can tongue flick on the microwave while I'm pouring coffee, and then I come back and they get back on the ladder. So I don't think that I get boring for them, but that might be. So I had an idea. Morning, everybody. I have an idea. These snakes are both almost on the ground, and I just want to give them something different on their ladder to distract them a little bit, because they just want something new to explore. Oh, that's fun. Oh, that's a fun climb. Look at that, see? So this rope's a really good one for them to climb. It keeps them distracted, and I'll probably keep it on here for the time being. But I do want to make some other changes on the ladder and make it more interesting for them to hang out on. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this Super Dwarf update. Thanks for watching. See you next week. I think maybe Python's climbing could just be its own video.